I'm Hugh Brownstone, a New York City-based street photographer, and welcome to my masterclass on street photography with B&H. Today, we're going to talk about street portraiture, my favorite genre of all. The first question is, why do I like it so much? And I'll tell you, it's because every time I come out and speak to an absolute stranger, find some common ground and a quick conversation to get to yes, I can take their photograph, it reaffirms for me that the world is not a uniformly terrible place. In that moment of yes, we give and we take. This is a critical concept in our street photography workshops. And what I mean by that is, we're not just asking for something, we're giving something. Because in that moment that I say, in essence, there's something unique that I see and I would love to catch it, it is an invitation, it is a validation. And when they accept it, it is a moment of collaboration and co-creation. Thank you so much. It's lovely what you do. It is wonderful, and I want all of you to experience that. Of course, most people who come to our workshops ask, how do you do that? How do you approach people? So let's talk about that, the approach. First, you have to know who to approach and who not to approach. That means reading body language, that means reading facial expressions, and also it means putting yourself in someone else's shoes. If you see someone clearly walking with purpose, you can tell walking from one destination to another, a meeting, a class, just getting to work on time, finding a bathroom, maybe you shouldn't ask. The second thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that when you approach, that person is safe. So you have to be situationally aware. You have to understand and make a judgment about where they are in themselves. This is part of what attracts me to different people on the street. All right, looking right at me. Right at me. Thank you, man. The next thing that you have to do is not simply, can I take your photograph? It's to engage them in a particular way that is unique to them. Very often you can tell from an article of clothing or a tattoo and follow that line in. Excuse me, I just noticed your sleeve. It's really quite something. Would you mind if I took your photograph? In that instant, I begin not with taking, but by giving. It's a compliment, but it's a compliment born of authenticity. That's really how I think. I encourage you to think and explore the same way. We almost always ask. We are not of the school to invade someone else's space, because in invading someone else's space, the photographer is fundamentally altering the situation. Our attitude is we're altering the situation, but in a positive way, because that's what I'm looking for. So, here's the secret. Once you get them to yes, you really are co-creating. And whether you know it or not, you now have been given implicit permission to help direct the scene. Can I get you to be right over here so that we don't have a distracting background? Perfect. So when you're photographing people on the street, you have to be keenly aware of the entire frame. What are on either side of the subject? What's behind the subject? You don't want the classic tree growing out of the back of their heads. Talk while you're doing it. That's fantastic, thank you. Would you mind? There's a tree coming out of your head. If I could have you move just a little bit this way, then maybe I can get the shot. Or, you know what, that looks great, but I see the light is very harsh. Can I move you back a few feet? You are moving together to create something, and that's wonderful. Can you do it? Can you move it a little bit? Yeah, and yeah, just like that. Just like that. What if you find a situation where you don't want to ask for permission, or if asking permission would intrude in a way that you wouldn't want to be treated, because this is a golden rule kind of situation, but you wanted to get the photograph anyway. The rule is, if you're going to be surreptitious, don't get caught. And this is when having an articulating screen, being able to tilt the camera 90 degrees, is really a critical advantage. What happens if you don't choose wisely? What happens if someone says, sorry dude, I'm busy? Don't try to convince them that they're not busy. Thank them and say, that's exactly why I asked. No harm, no foul. Take it easy.
Just not today, sorry.
Okay, no worries. Thank you. What happens if you're trying to do this surreptitiously and someone sees you and gets upset? Don't run away. Don't steal the image. If that person approaches you, apologize and say, I'm so sorry. Would you like me to delete the photo? And you need to mean it. You will happily delete the photo because otherwise you're on the other side of the golden rule. What happens if that's not enough? What happens if the person becomes threatening? You need to pull a New Yorker, man. You walk. And that has happened only twice in any of our workshops. And we handled it. Situational awareness is critical. What about actual technique? How do you want to use the gear? Well, there is a school of street photography that you set the aperture to f8, you can zone focus, you set the distance at about 10 feet, and you're golden. But we live in an era where we have autofocus lenses and we can shoot shallow depth of field. The challenge is, when is it appropriate to shoot shallow? When do you want more context? Background. Do you want the background so blurred that you can't see that you're in a city? I say no. But hey, that's just me, and I'm one person. What happens after you get the shot? It's a moment to celebrate. It's a moment to share. It's a moment to say, thanks, man, that was awesome. And depending on how they look, you might turn around and show them. Very often what will happen is someone will say, where can I find this? And if you have an Instagram account, give them your Instagram account. Tell them if it shows up, that's where it'll show up. Sometimes people will reach out to you, whether their image shows up or not, requesting that you send the file to them. Do it, because in that, you've just made the world a slightly better place. Some advanced tips. 1, pick the right time of day to shoot. If you go into Chinatown, for example, first thing in the morning, no one's there. The stores are closed. 2nd, we generally don't shoot between late morning and late afternoon because the light is very unflattering. Early morning, late afternoon, and into the evening, that's prime. Also, as you may gather from behind me here in Washington Square Park, beginning around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, the park just fills with people. 9:30 on a weekday morning, everybody's already in class. There are very few other people out here. Another advanced tip, light. It's very easy, even when the light is low, to create harsh lighting effects. Your objective is not to make someone ugly, nor is it to make someone beautiful. It's to capture them, but use light as your friend and not your enemy. This is why I suggest that you actually have control. In addition to thinking about the elements inside the frame, think about how the light is hitting your subject. Let's talk about dynamic range, because what you don't want to do is have your subject perfectly exposed and the city, which is the canvas upon which this is all contingent, is blown out. This is when you have to really use the EVF, and this is why we like to dial in our exposures manually. EVF is an incredible, incredible tool. The flip side is, every now and again, shooting an HDR, bracketed exposure, quick 3 burst, will work. So try it, see how it goes. The idea of posing is diametrically opposed, get it, to the whole concept of street photography, isn't it? And yet, it isn't. We're not asking people to go like this, we're not asking people to go like this, but what we're trying to do is, in a split second, tap into a little bit of who that person is and what your reaction is. And can you look right at me and make a wild face? That was awesome, man. Thank you so much. Because in a photograph, you always see something in the relationship between the subject and the photographer. The more interesting question is, from what angle do you shoot? Do you shoot at eye level? Is there something heroic so you want to go down? Is there something so that you want to be a little bit higher? Do you want to crouch? Well, not me, but shooting low the way a Vivian Maier or a Fan Ho used to with a Rolleiflex, this is a really interesting thing to do. You should try it. It will change your perspective. Take advantage of those articulating screens that you guys have. Use them. What about the actual mechanics? What about the shutter speed in the aperture? I generally like shooting no slower than 1/500th of a second on the street. I shoot from as wide open as 1.4 down to about 5.6 or 8 if I really want the background in focus as well. I rarely shoot at f11, never at 16 or 22. I'd rather go to neutral density filters, and the reason why is because that's when you get into diffraction. You've paid all this money for a camera with high resolution, you've paid all this money for great glass, but if you make that aperture go down beyond the point of diffraction, you simply wasted the money. You haven't gotten the maximum out of your deal. What about ISO? Well, ISO is going to trail behind shutter speed and aperture. But the reality is, with today's cameras, you can go a lot higher than you ever could with film. Is 1600 okay? Many times it is. 3200 can be. When we get beyond 3200, then the question becomes, what is the essence of the image? Does the essence of the image require razor-sharp detail in the eye, for example? Or can you let that go because the context is all? That's something that you'll have to think about when you're shooting. Next, we're going to cover editing. Come back and join us. I think you'll see just how powerful that part of the process is.